Ready? There we go. Okay. All right, welcome in everybody. I see some people starting to join us. We're going to get started in just a minute. We'll let some more people join us, but I will be live this morning with my friend, colleague, Alex Amorosi to break down your horoscopes for the month of January. So we're going to look at a few key transits for all 12 signs today. I'm also going to be drawing a tarot card for each of the 12 signs to help us unpack the meaning of this little period of time that we're going to be looking at as the focus of our horoscopes today. So as you guys are streaming in, it'd be nice to know where you're coming from in the world. Always nice to hear from people. And let's see. Mariana, an old student from Argentina. Nice. Well, I'm glad you're here. And from Uruguay. Nice to see where you guys are coming from in the world. Let's see here. Okay, Chicago-ish. I like that. Nice. New Mexico. Okay. Bonnie, nice to see you. It's been a while. From South Florida. Great. That's fantastic. Finland and Missouri. Let's see. Justine in Connecticut. Castleberry, Alabama. California. Newfoundland. Oh my gosh. Sunny and 70 in South Florida. Ooh, that sounds nice. From Italy. Amazing. Well, as we are getting ready here to begin, I'm going to bring my buddy Alex on. Hey, Alex.
This is so cool seeing where everybody's coming from.
I know, right?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Arizona.
Ciao, Alessandra.
And Denver.
Wow.
Montreal.
Wow.
Greenville. Yeah, nice. Cassandra from Minneapolis. Cassandra's been out for our Ashley's herbal gatherings, and
awesome.
Our kids hang out with each other. Nice to see you, Cassandra. Alyssa from Minneapolis as well. Nice to see you. Jenny from Puerto Rico. Very nice.
Wow.
Another Minneapolis. I love that we have like a Minneapolis.
The Midwest is representing today.
I know. Whitney's here from Minneapolis. Vera from Greenbelt. Washington, D.C. Amazing. Oh my gosh. Hong Kong and Norway. Yeah. Indianapolis, Indiana, San Jose, Atlanta, Greenville, North Carolina. My sister lives in North Carolina. Alabama, Puerto Rico, Istanbul. Wow. I know. Illinois, Munich, Hawks in Minneapolis visiting family. I saw the Mall of America post yesterday. It was funny. It's like obligatory. If you come to Minneapolis, you got to go to the Mall of America. And then you realize that it's a mall just like every other mall. It's just bigger. Louisiana.
Grazie.
No, it's cool. The theme park in the Mall of America is fun. Yeah, wow.
I didn't realize it was in Minneapolis. I always thought it was in Indiana.
The Mall of America?
Yeah.
Oh, come on, Alex. Get your Midwest.
Oh, sorry.
That and like big balls of twine or yarn or rubber bands like that you meet along the way. You should know where everything is in the Midwest.
I'm sorry. I'm just an innocent astrologer from the East Coast. we don't get out much.
Yeah. Nice. Los Angeles.
LA.
Manitou Springs. Nyack. Yeah, we are from such diverse places. Salem. Mindy's here. Awesome. Well, it's good to see you guys. As we get near to 100 people, you guys know we'll get started in just a minute. We're going to be breaking down your horoscopes today for January. We thought we'd do a live stream to break them down as opposed to like a normal posted video. So this would be a little bit, it'll be fun to come live and do this today as the year is ready to conclude. So let's see. Well, a few more people. Silicon Valley,
Silicon Valley.
nice.
Okay.
Denmark. Let's all like the video. Yes, let's. But, I mean, regardless of how we perform, even you could just like it.
Yeah.
That'd be great. From Ohio.
Wow.
Kimberly from NYC.
Hey, Kim.
Nice. Okay, well, it is great to see everybody here. We're closing in on about 100 people. So what I'm going to do is roll out our little 30-second starting clip, and then we will begin. All right. Well, on that note, officially welcome in everybody. This is Adam Ellenboss from Nightlight Astrology. I'm joined by my colleague and friend Alex Amorosi. You guys know Alex from our monthly breakdown of your horoscopes that we do together. Right around the end of every month, we always take a couple of minutes out and get together to break down horoscopes for the month ahead for all 12 signs. We pick a couple of the major transits that we think are going to be speaking most loudly, and then we take a look at them for all 12 signs. You could listen to these for your sun or rising sign. I mean, heck, if you listen to your moon sign, that'd be fine too. So that's our goal for today. Afterward, if there is time, depending on how long it takes us, we may open up for a little Q&A. It just, you know, it's like we'll see how long it takes and how gassed we are. But at any rate, as you guys know, I come on to do these live streams at the end of the year as a way of also promoting the Kickstarter campaign. As of the time that I am making this, we have 1,099 backers, and we are trying to get to 1,777 by New Year's Eve, which means we are about 678 away, which is really good. We've picked up speed and steam, and we're rolling along, but we still need a lot of support. 678 more backers to go. So if you have already donated, first of all, a big thank you. We really do appreciate the support that you place and the confidence that you place in us, myself, the team, all of us at Nightlight. We really do appreciate it. If you have not yet donated, I hope that you'll consider pitching in. You'll find the link to the Kickstarter in the live stream chat. If you're listening to this after the live stream is over and you're listening to the recording, you can find it pinned to the top of the comment section or in the description of this video. You can also find the link by just going over to our website, which is nightlightastrology.com. I'll just put it up right there on the screen so you can see it. Go over to nightlightastrology.com and you can find the link. In fact, I'll put it up on the screen so that I can just show you. If you go over to the website, you'll notice at the top the 2024 Kickstarter link. Click on that and it'll take you over. By the way, when you're over there and you donate, you can pick up a variety of rewards. One of the things that Alex and I have done is we have recorded about 45 to 60 minutes worth of a focused horoscope for your sun or rising sign for all of the major transits of 2024. So we look forward at the entire year and we tell you what to expect for your rising sign horoscope. And if you want, you as a reward, as a thank you gift, when you pledge, you can pick up one of those videos. We'll send it to you the first week of January so you can have a listen and see what's coming in the year ahead. There's a bunch of other rewards too. We have different kinds of readings that we offer. There's an astrology of 2024 video that goes over the major transits of the year from a mundane perspective, just for everyone. What are the biggest transits of the year? There's some horary readings that you can still pick up. And then we have a variety of classes that we offer from our previous masterclass series or the upcoming masterclass series. Those are advanced topics in ancient astrology. Probably the best deal that we offer, which we won't be offering again, we only offer it during the Kickstarter, is the discounts on our online training programs. When you go over to Nightlight Astrology, you will see that we have a first year, second year, and third year program in ancient astrology. These are courses that can be taken for the purpose of developing a professional practice, of course. They're all certification classes that have exams at the end that you take and test out of to get your certification. We also have a horary astrology course. So there's 4 major years worth of curriculum. And Anyway, these programs are also taken though by many people for the sake of just developing your hobby, love, and interest in astrology. One of the things that is really good about taking astrological training programs is that when you get done with the program, even if you're not intending to practice for other people, your ability to use your own chart to study and use transits for yourself or for people close to you is light years beyond what it is prior to taking a program that gives you a really structured, guided, intentional experience of learning. So our programs are really well structured. They're really well supported. We have staff in place to help you in and outside of class as you integrate the material into your life and kind of take it on board. The first year programs begin in June and November, and when you pick up class passes, the standard cost is cut in half through the Kickstarter. So you can our early bird rate. We have like an early bird rate that we run. It's still $500 cheaper than the early bird rate. And then if you bundle them together, the savings goes up to the point where it's almost 75% off per class. So our 4-class pass is our best program that we offer, where each program ends up being $500, which is, that's almost 75% off the normal cost of one of our training programs. These programs are, in my humble opinion, and on behalf of like the whole team of people that is in the behind the scenes producing these programs, they're some of the best in the industry right now. So there are other good programs out there too. I'm not trying to say we're the only or the best, but they are some of the best out there. And so I highly recommend that you take advantage of the sales on all of our programs before New Year's Eve. If you'd ever like to study, they don't expire, so you can use them whenever you want. They're transferable. So if you want to get a 3-class pass and take 2 for yourself and give 1 to a friend, you could do that. And the other thing to note about them is that all of our programs they meet live, but everything is recorded. So we have people from all over the world, just like you guys are coming from places all over the world, who end up taking our programs remotely. So you can certainly do that. Now, remember that our programs also feature need-based tuition. And this is one of the main reasons that we do the Kickstarter, is that every year we have a lot of students who come through and they might need help to make taking a class like this possible because they're on a limited income. We have need-based tuition. So if for whatever reason you're looking at this and going, even the sale price is beyond what I can do, just remember that the success of this Kickstarter enables us to work with people, maybe like yourself, who need a little extra help. So come spring, if you want to take the program and you can't use the Kickstarter discounts and sales, apply for need-based tuition. And we have some days left yet for our Kickstarter. And I think we're going to be successful this year. And that really enables us to make sure that no one gets priced out. So even if you can't make the sale price of our Kickstarter, don't feel bad. Reach out and we'll see if we can do something for you with our need-based tuition when the programs come around again in the next year. Anyway, those are the best things that we have to offer through the Kickstarter. 1 through 4 class passes, our masterclass series, the Roots and Spheres series, which also begins in January, is a moon circle that meets before new and full moons. Come join us in community to immerse ourselves in every moon cycle and work with plants and rituals that we design to work alongside of the astrological energies of every month, and then discuss them and break them down in community, reflect and process together. It's a really nice way to make the astrological journey of the year ahead more embodied and communal. So if you're into that kind of thing, check out the Roots and Spheres program. That's on sale through the Kickstarter as well. A couple $100 off you save if you use it. Anyway, I think that's about it for promoting the
Adam, can I add a plug for your classes just quickly?
Yes, please. I'd love that.
One of the things about Adam's classes that I love so much, even if you're like, I'm into astrology, it's cool, you will learn about history, philosophy, the way the ancients conceptualized the universe. It is so multidimensionally fascinating that, like, if you're just into like learning about how did the ancients conceptualize the universe, like how did they see things, how did they understand life, how did they see their way through lifetimes, how did they understand the karmic cycles, it will blow your mind the amount of information that Adam puts in his classes. And I found it so interesting when I took his first year about just how much information there was about history and philosophy as well as astrology. It was just really amazing, Adam. So I just want to add that quick plug in for it.
Oh, thanks, man. I really appreciate that. Yeah, that's such nice feedback. We have a few people out there who are shouting out the programs. I really appreciate it. The Kickstarter is like our major sale for all of our programs. So it's the best time of year to get on board and save. There's a few other people saying some really nice things. Whitney, please donate to the Kickstarter, folks. The investment is 100% worth it if you care about rich astrological content. Love Nightlight. Thank you, Whitney. Really appreciate you. Appreciate everyone. I mean, 1,099 backers who have said, you know, I like this channel, I like the content, and I'm going to pitch in and, you know, keep this thing going with a unique philosophy for how we support ourselves, how we earn a living, and how we, you know, not only just keep the lights on, but how we thrive as a business and build cool things. It comes through this unique idea that you can just put content out there, and that as you build an audience, even if a small percentage says, you know what, I'll just pitch in and support it, or pick up a class pass when it's on sale or whatever, that it works. And then we don't have to use paywalls, subscriptions, exclusive paid content to try to earn a living, which I just don't personally like that model. I like doing this because I think it's a little more interesting. And I don't know, it's closer to my values. I remember, you know, as a kid, there was when we were, you know, my mom would take us to get our dental work done at the University of Minnesota Dental School, where the students were getting practice doing like your, what do you call it, like teeth cleaning, you know? And so we get our teeth cleaned by the students, and it was like a minimal cost, and it did two things at once. It gives them experience, and it saves people who need a little help in that way. Everything at Nightlight is rooted in a similar philosophy, that there's a different way of doing exchange and of being successful, of growing content, of developing experience, of building the success of future astrologers, of making content accessible, etc. So at any rate, I have all of you to thank for making this successful for 10 years in a row now. This is the 10th year that we've done this. And yeah, I just want to thank all of you before we get started today. So anyway, we are going to launch into horoscopes now. And then I might, maybe like halfway through horoscopes, after 6 signs, I'll take a break, plug the Kickstarter again, and then we'll keep going. Yeah. All righty. Let me just get this up. So we're set with Aries. Yeah, thank you for that. That's a nice comment. So let's talk a little bit about the transits that we're going to look at today first. And I'm going to put the chart up on the screen, and we're going to take a look at it. So the major transit that we are looking at today, as you can probably guess, in the month of January, is going to be Pluto and the Sun entering Aquarius as they conjoin simultaneously. This is happening on January 20th into the 21st. So there's the Sun and Pluto coming together in Aquarius. That's the major transit that we're looking at, alongside of 5 days later, we have a full moon in Leo that creates this very powerful T-square. So here you can see that just 5 days after the Sun and Pluto conjoin, there's going to be a full moon, and the full moon engages the Sun, Pluto, Jupiter, the moon, all in a T-square together. So we have a full moon squaring Jupiter, the Sun squaring Jupiter, and by proxy, the Pluto's entrance into Aquarius. So there's about 5 days in late January that really are very, very explosive. One of the more significant full moons of 2024. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at that whole sign house of Aquarius for all 12 signs, take a look at how you might be experiencing Pluto's entrance into Aquarius, and then look at the full moon in Leo and the whole sign house of Taurus, where Jupiter is located. So those 3 houses are going to be our focus, and the dates are January 20th to the 25th for all 12 signs that we're focusing on for the month of January. You ready to go, Alex?
Let's do it. Pluto in Aquarius all day, every day.
I know, right? It's like everyone for the entire month of January is going to be talking about Pluto in Aquarius for sure. Let me just make sure I can kind of, okay, here we go. Okay, so let's start with Aries. The entrance of Pluto and the Sun. I'm going to keep it on the full moon day for sake of ease and not flipping around too much. The Sun and Pluto conjoin as they enter Aquarius in your 11th house if you're in Aries. initially, the first thing that comes to my mind is that the 11th house was, because it's in the process of rising up to the top of the sky, but has not yet reached the top of the sky. It was associated with people that help you get where you want to go, as in your ambitions and the things that are directing you toward the top of the sky, as a symbol of your ambitions, your dreams, your hopes, your aspirations. And anyone that is of like-mindedness in terms of the things they're pursuing, or the ability that they have to help you reach those goals. So it was called the house of friends and allies, wishes, hopes, and aspirations. It was called the joy of Jupiter. And it's this house that really focuses on the like-minded people that act as like allies or community, but not just for the sake of leisure, but for the sake of ambition and purpose in life, which is an important distinction, because there are other houses that more adequately represent friendships when it comes to leisure and like relaxing and having fun. Not that you can't have fun with people you share similar goals in common with, but there's a little bit more of, we're aiming an arrow at a target here in the 11th house. So anyway, on that note, the thing that comes to my mind, Alex, is that not just now, but in the course of 2024 on the whole, Aries are looking at a transformation of their aspirations, their long-term goals and dreams, as well as, or maybe it's kind of like or the people by means of which you get there, the groups or the allies, the friends, the colleagues, by means of which you attain or reach your goals and dreams. And that there's significant transformation happening around these areas for Aries right now.
Oh, absolutely. And, with Pluto moving in with the sun, especially Pluto, powerful people that can help you. This is usually, Pluto often can bring great, great resources. It's also a sign, I'm looking at this too, with the sun being the exaltation ruler for Aries and ruler of the 5th house, the ruler of the moon in this full moon. There's something here too about, Aries and a lot of fire signs can be very self-directed and we sort of self-reliant. And there's something here about, a systematic air sign like Aquarius and the sun and Pluto here of, trusting in the systems of your networks a little bit, trusting that, there can be a lot of benefit and power that comes from the people who surround you and the community that surrounds you. It's just with Pluto, it's always a little bit of like, I'm just going to check it out a little bit before I put myself all in with it. It's always a good idea with Pluto to check out, is this a friend or a frenemy? Sometimes is a good thing to look at with that
Yeah,
planet, in that
for sure.
in the 11th house,
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to draw a tarot card for each of the 12 signs today. And the card that I drew for Aquarius, if you can see, is the Hanged Man. For Aries. Is the Hanged Man. This card comes up in a lot of people see it and they get kind of, I don't know, they get freaked out because it looks like someone's on a medieval torture rack or something. But the way that I read this is, first of all, notice the halo around his head and notice how he's sort of suspended upside down. When I think about this, one of the phrases that comes to my mind is divinely inspired waiting, divinely inspired holding back, or being suspended in a place of uncertainty, or being sort of temporarily prohibited or held back. But there's if you can embrace that situation, it reminds me of the phrase ancient astrologers use for the cadent houses, metacosmia, which is like a liminal space between worlds. When I think of the Hanged Man here, I think of the idea that this year Aries find themselves between worlds, and that there's some needing to sort of dangle in the void a little bit, and that there's a kind of sacred way in which you have to be very patient, and maybe even there's certain sacrifices that have to be made, but they're being done on behalf of this deeper paradigm change that's coming in and redirecting your dreams, aspirations, social dynamics. And I would say the Hanged Man is an image to look to for inspiration and guidance in terms of what qualities to bring forth in yourself to meet the challenges of the moment. Aries love to push forward, right? There's something. Hanged Man is not a card that when I see, usually I think of like ramming forward, but instead I think of opportunities are going to present themselves, but some degree of hanging in the void, of waiting, and of sacred patience are required for the next phase to really take shape. And that's not easy when you've got North Node eclipse in April in your first house, April 8th. There's going to be, the drum is just going to be beating, like, let's change, let's change. But you have to remember, like, Saturn's in your 12th house this year. There may be elements of sacrifice, waiting, being slightly held back or checked. Jupiter square Saturn is a very similar dynamic throughout the year for everyone, where Jupiter and Pluto are connecting in a trine. They want to move forward in these very exciting ways, especially by means of new ideas. But there's a little bit of a check from Saturn and Pisces, which is a little bit like the call to make a sacrifice temporarily, to wait, or to be slightly held back or checked by something that might be sort of frustrating, but it's not there to mess you up. It's there to refine what's happening.
I love that, Adam. I'm thinking too, with like, especially in January, with the ascendant ruler Mars being exalted in the 10th house, the push is going to feel very strong. And I'm thinking about a mentor of mine back in one of my old jobs about management. He said, whenever you take on more power and responsibility, wait. Just wait, pause. Don't just run forward with it. Take a second to assess what you have, what's going on. And I think, I'm just getting that sense from what you're saying here, this idea of just like pause, wait, assess, because the impetus to move quickly, especially in January while Mars is in Capricorn, might feel very strong.
Right. And then we have this full moon in Leo on the 25th for Aries that's landing in the 5th house and squaring Jupiter in the 2nd. This is interesting because, Aquarius is going to say, the way to evolve is through different social identification, different kinds of groups of people, or different social institutions that are going to be better facilitating your goals and dreams. The Leo full moon pulls in the opposite direction in the 5th house and says, I'm also a creative being that doesn't fit into any category, that resists identification with a group, that needs to, march to the beat of my own, sort of sovereign Leo drum in the 5th house. The tension from Jupiter in Taurus in the 2nd house is about the embodiment, the physical, sensual, and material embodiment of desires and goals. This is a tricky thing to balance. Aspirations, dreams, and wishes in much larger, long-term ways, along with the need for your creative individuality to be a part of what's happening, and the need for some form of abundance or material security or support. All of those things together require there's a delicate balance between those things. If you go too far in the direction of individuality, you'll lose the collective by means of which you get to where you're going. You can't lose yourself and your creative identity. And you also have to be concerned about the development of solid resources that are there to help you create security.
And I think, if there's any planet you want sitting in the middle of a T-square, it's Jupiter, especially Jupiter that's just moved direct, because there's a sense here that those dualities, if you can find a way of finding coherence or balance with them, if you can draw a new, if you can tell a new story with Jupiter, a new narrative that allows for, yes, I can let myself merge a little bit into a collective where I receive all sorts of ideas and support, but I also know not how to lose myself in that, and I think that that's a delicate balance we're all playing, where we want to be individual, we want to feel individualized, but we also recognize we're within a community of people and we have responsibilities within that. And also that we can help each other a lot when we're in that kind of connection. I think Jupiter as a sort of a mediator here, especially in Taurus, is like, can I find a narrative or a coherent story that allows for both? And sometimes, we can tell a story where two things are true at the same time. I can both be an individual and be an individual within a community. And I think that is Aquarius in its highest sense, is highly individualized people living in a community of highly individualized people. There's a sense where the networks and the connections are really important with that.
You don't want to be isolated because the only thing that you have is a group. And as soon as the group is gone, you're lonely and alone. And, it's like someone who doesn't know what to do with themselves once they have quiet alone time. But on the other hand, you don't want to be, there's a way in which being utterly individual is isolating too. If you're not the center of attention, you don't know how to be a part of a group. So it's like that tension between Leo and Aquarius is so important for Aries right now. And then the mediating spot of Jupiter in the 2nd, saying we're trying to build resources, we're trying to develop security, we're trying to enhance what we have at our disposal to feel safe or peaceful or happy or abundant in life. Yeah, let's go forward to Taurus rising. You ready?
Let's do it.
All right. So we have, I'm going to let you lead this one. We have the two planets, Sun, Pluto, entering the 10th house, and then the full moon that will highlight the tension between these three planets. Why don't we start with the Sun, Pluto, and then we'll move to the full moon, and I'll draw a card while you're starting us off here.
So one of the things I have been noticing a lot with clients who are Taurus rising, having Pluto now heading into Aquarius in the 10th house, is if there's anywhere in your career, in your job right now, where there's been kind of an itch for a little while, or there's been like something under the surface that doesn't quite feel right, or isn't quite aligned, or maybe something that needs to be addressed, as Pluto moves into the 10th house, that usually will come to the surface, and it will come to the surface in a way that feels somewhat urgent. Not always bad, but like, you know what? I just got to take care of this now. Like my career, I've been wanting to change jobs for a while, and now you know what? I got to put feelers out and see what I can do in terms of getting some movement going on that. I think that moving in with the sun, which rules the fourth house, there's something changing around the way you relate to your career, the way you're seen, or the way you're seen in the world, or your sort of public face to the world, that is shifting with your relationship to your family or ancestry in some way. And we see like the moon in Leo now in your fourth house, full moon in Leo. There's a sense of like maybe finding a greater sense of individuality, responsibility, or prominence within your family structures that is allowing you to move towards a redesigned or a rebirthing in your career that is also deeply tied to with Jupiter as the mediator of this T square, deeply tied to a coherent shift in identity for yourself, who you believe yourself to be, who you see yourself as. I've been saying with Jupiter in the first house, the beliefs that we hold to a large extent create the reality of who we are and how we see ourselves and our identity. So there, I feel like all of this dynamic change between the moon in the fourth house, the sun and Pluto in the 10th house, there's something being rewritten in your own sense of identity, who you hold yourself to be. Jupiter, again, is a great ally in that Jupiter helps you sort of tie together what can feel like disparate threads into one sort of storyline.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. The card that I pulled for Tauruses for this configuration in January is the Two of Pentacles, and it really suggests. I mean, you can see like the ships are rolling up and down on the waves. He's standing on one leg. He looks like he's sort of juggling two coins captured in the midst of the infinity symbol. I see the Two of Pentacles often as while things are in the process of gestating, you're juggling, you're multitasking. This is a sign, you know, really, if you think about this, it also sort of foreshadows the advancement of Jupiter into your second house, where, you know, a lot of opportunities for Tauruses this year to be developing new things around business and money, business and finances, maybe different philosophies around work or business that are coming forth. And they're coming forth as you're trying to maintain the balance between, you know, your own needs as an individual, which are often associated with the fourth house. The fourth house was called a moksha house. In Indian astrology, the house is related to the idea of release or liberation from worldly suffering and entanglement, which could be as simple as going to bed at night, right? Or going to watch Netflix in the evening, which is a kind of superficial form of moksha, you could say, compared to, say, enlightenment, release from samsara or whatever. But still, the Leo fourth house for Tauruses says, you know, how do you look at your individuality, your creative individual needs in terms of release from the world, home, family, resting, and that kind of deep yin space of the fourth house, as opposed to powerful changes that are coming into the forward facing professional house. And it's also being mediated by some kind of self reconstructing that Jupiter in your first house is doing, which will often coincide with changes in health, appearance, diet, personal, psychological changes that you're going through, which you've been going through for a while because you just had eclipses in your first house for a year and a half. So this idea of, and remember the Jupiter Uranus conjunction comes in April in your first house. So it's like a year of major personal renaissance. But that personal renaissance is also running through this tense conversation between private needs and powerful changes that are trying to work their way into your career house. Not surprising, you're juggling a few different things, right? Especially around the material stuff. The changes around business and money and finances, and maybe the different kinds of responsibilities or obligations that you have in the material sense. This is often a card that suggests things are in transition. You're juggling a few things. And as things are in transition, there might be a lot of exciting new things that are developing. But that's also like, how many balls can you hold up in the air at the same time? So managing time, money, energy, and resources, balancing, work and rest, and looking at this space of personal reconstruction and reformation. These are big themes for Tauruses this year. Anything you want to add to that, Alex?
Yeah, riffing off of that, there's sometimes, when you gain a lot of prominence quickly, or something changes very publicly for you and you're suddenly more known, or you're suddenly more seen in some way, it's so important to maintain a sense of individuality by having a private sphere that you retreat to. And I'll often, when I'm working with clients doing energy work, and one of the things I'll say in consultations a lot is, have there be certain spaces in your home that you don't put on social media, or have there be certain times where you're not publicly available, or recognize that there's a certain aspects of your life that you hold private, because that's how you remain tethered to who you are, and you don't feel like you're getting spread out too thin. So I feel like that is a part of this tension, like that idea of the Two of Pentacles, Adam, where you're sort of like, you're juggling, like, well, if I have more power, prominence, visibility, more resources come to me, this idea of money and Jupiter in the second house, Pluto in the 10th. How do I make this full moon may be asking you to start a process of like, what do I keep for myself? Where is the Netflix space for myself? What are the things I do that I don't tell everybody, about in the outer world, but it's just for me to recharge with myself and those closest to me?
Yeah, this is a kind of year too where I could see like, okay, let me just weave a story. This is probably crazier than most people will experience. You get a promotion and you find out you're pregnant. Say it's a female Taurus rising or whatever. You get a promotion, you realize you're pregnant, and you were just getting into a space where you were transforming your body, and now your body's going to transform in a totally different direction than you thought it was going to. You see how there's that level of like very personal, physical, psychological changes paired with changes around home, family, and this kind of private sphere of life where you're developing the fruit and joy of life that's not spent in the workplace. But then boom, you got a promotion, and it's the biggest promotion of your life. That kind of tension of like trying to juggle these different demands and values comes to my mind. And it's like I get that phrase, like an embarrassment of riches. Like, these are good opportunities, but there's still stress that comes with them.
Yeah.
All right, let's go forward to Gemini rising. And again, like, remember that we're looking at January 20th to about the 25th, which is the Sun Pluto's entrance into Aquarius and their conjunction, followed by the full moon in Leo. For Geminis, that happens between these three places right here, the 9th, the 3rd, and the 12th, all of which were called metacosmia, or liminal spaces. The cadent houses are really interesting because they really point to transitional spaces that are often spiritual, emotional, psychological, intellectual, cognitive, and there's don't underestimate the power of these houses. But usually what's indicated by significant transits in these houses is a change in the modes of perception, like Aldous Huxley book, The Doors of Perception. When you walk through, have like a psychedelic or a mystical experience of any kind, your consciousness shifts in a significant way and you see the world. You can't ever walk back out. You're in a new world and you'll just see in a new way. And there's you can't like put the toothpaste back in the tube with that kind of experience. This feels like that for Geminis, especially considering that by May, Jupiter's entering your first house and trining Pluto in the 9th, which suggests very significant new ideas by means of which to understand yourself by. But here in January, we're seeing this kind of signaling of a paradigm change. the ninth house Pluto is so much about reworking your beliefs, your convictions, your moral or spiritual compass is being totally reoriented, maybe because of new people that are coming into your life. Air signs are very social, new groups of people. But then the question also becomes, how do I retain my own individual mindedness with the Leo in the third house?
Mhm.
And then also, what are my true desires and in the world? Like the Jupiter in the 12th. See, it's not always easy for air signs. You know, you get an air sign in Aquarius and you have Capricorn in the 12th. Right? So there's this, Libra in the first, Virgo's in the 12th. Earth is a kind of blind spot for the air rising signs. And that usually means that there's a conversation happening this year that's not just about, the balance between my own mental and intellectual sovereignty and a change in larger philosophical paradigms, but it's also about how these changes are helping you get into contact with the more earthy, sensual, embodied desires that you have, which are not as easy to identify often for air signs rising. So there's some way in which this intellectual or spiritual or philosophical shift is also asking you to get in touch with the bodily level of your instincts and desires this year. Those are the first things that come to my mind. What stands out to you, Alex?
Well, first of all, let me go in this order because I just love what you just said. I think your body, air signs will tend to, and I have an air moon, I know this, you tend to rely on your intellect and cerebral sort of analytical problem solving skills. You detach from something, you look at it from outside, and then you sort of rationally understand where you're going to go with it and how you're going to organize it. I think this Jupiter in the 12th house, and this is a little intuitive read on the chart on this configuration too, is asking you to trust the barometer of your body too. That your body holds a systemic felt wisdom that when we learn how to access it, and it does take some time to learn how to access that wisdom, it takes some time to go into it. And like Adam said, this is a 12th house, so it's a blind spot for an air sign rising. But being curious about what are the felt embodied impressions that I'm receiving? What are the ways that I'm shifting and changing in my body where I'm learning to understand, like even just a simple body scan meditation where you feel your head, you feel your heart, you feel your belly, you feel your legs. You start to get a barometer of where your body is and when information causes the feeling in your body to change. That can be so incredibly valuable. And actually, that leads me to the Pluto in the ninth house, which, if I take this from a mundane level, I've been saying this, that I think Pluto is going to, in Aquarius, will offer us radical paradigm shifts, that over the next 20 years, we will conceptualize the universe in a very different way. I think in a miniature sense, that begins for Gemini risings here with Pluto moving into the ninth house. There's like a total paradigm shift in your beliefs where things that modalities, technologies, whether they're electronic technologies or they're spiritual technologies or whatever, make themselves known to you that totally alter the paradigm of the way you see the world. And that begins with this. There's more to come, but I think the sort of the gong strike is here for that.
Here we go. Sorry, I muted myself while I was drawing a card because for whatever reason, when I shuffle the cards, it sounds like a flock of geese is like leaving. So, so the card that I drew is such a powerful card for Geminis. It's the Death card. Now, people frequently misunderstand the Death card, including myself. If it comes up, I usually freak out a little bit. But notice a couple of things. One, that you have the figure of like something like a dead king. Okay. Well, Aquarius is the king slayer. One of the things that Aquarius naturally does as it opposes Leo is it kills the king. Now, the death of the king can be a disaster in terms of strong organizing principles that keep us sane and make us feel like the kingdom is established and there's a gravitational center holding it all together. Well, what happens when we go through a little ego death? That's the little ego is the king that wears the crown. And we all know that our ego dies and is reborn over and over and over because ultimately the post of the king is the post of a servant. If you think about it archetypally, the role of a king or a queen it's genderless really, is the role of a central organizing idea or principle that can create coherence. Jupiter is very similar. They were both related to emperors, empresses, kings, queens, rulers, leaders. When the king, you can see in this card again, when the king dies, you see in the distance, there's a sun rising. It doesn't mean that the sun has died. It doesn't mean that organizational principles are forever gone, or that you don't have an ego anymore. You don't get to have a sane center to operate from. It means that the orientation of that center is changing, or it means the person playing the role is changing. You know, like Jim Carrey famously said, depression is, I see it as a way of your avatar saying that it's sick of playing the role it's been assigned.
That's beautiful.
You know, it's like, I don't want to play this role anymore.
Yeah.
You know, this to me is probably about the death of some form of mental or intellectual self-reliance that you've had.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're getting to let go because new ideas are coming in, and it requires a different person to come forth within you, a different ego that can work according to new ideas that grant more freedom and more embodiment, like more physical, sensual embodiment. So you less to control mentally. And I also like this card because it doesn't suggest that the thing at the center is dying. It suggests that the person that's been holding the center is dying. That's common. Kings, queens, leaders die, just like the office of the presidency in the United States. Ideally, I mean, there's been tons of examples of poor examples of leaders and presidents and kings and queens and whatever. But the important thing is that the position, the post, is like Brahma in Hinduism, is a post in every universe that any elevated soul can step into. And Brahma is more about an organizational feature of a universe than it is about a specific person. Like Brahma, bow down to Brahma. It's sort of more like saying that we worship the idea of something that it's more like worship unity, not the person holding the concept of unity in place, right? Yeah. And so there's something about that with the death card, intellectually or spiritually, that's coming up for Geminis this year. This is a year where you might have to call into question paradigms on the level of ego or belief or intellect, and replace the person that's been holding the post.
But, and if there was ever a sign that is uniquely suited to that kind of adaptation, it's Gemini. The nimbleness of Gemini. It would depend on where your Mercury is, your ascendant ruler is, but it's a nimble sign in that regard. And I think, the line I always love from The Crown, where she's, it's the monarchy that's supposed to shine, not the monarch. And in a symbolic sense, an archetypal sense, it's the institution. It's that organizes and someone represents it. And you might just be putting in a new identity that is representing the institution now. That idea.
The extent to which a Leo is happy, truly happy, is the extent to which they feel that they are serving that star role that they play, that they don't get identified with it, but that they understand, wow, there's a special, unique destiny that I get to participate in by method acting my way into a role that is somehow needed in the collective. Yeah. And if I step into that role and serve it humbly, I will have served something that lives on and that places me in the stars. Mm-hmm. But the perspective is me, a humble little person like anyone else. Mm-hmm. When you have a leader that acts that way, that carries their post, but just acts like, well, I guess it fell to me somehow, I'm just a normal person. Mm-hmm. Those are just the most magnanimous, most attractive individuals because they're humble, even though they're fulfilling a great role. Exactly. There's something about that's happening for Geminis this year on the level of mind, I think.
Agreed.
All right. See, there's the geese. I'm going to show you guys. Let's listen to this. That's good.
I live by a river where there are many Canada geese that fly, and it's not unlike that sound, Adam.
That's right.
My cat goes crazy. Gotta get him.
All right, let's go on to Cancer. For Cancers, we have the full moon in Leo in the 2nd. Of course, the sun and Pluto are entering the 8th, tapping into Jupiter in the 11th. This is interesting because my wife Ashley, she's a Cancer rising. So whenever I do Cancer horoscopes, I always can hear little echoes of like things she's noticed or experienced or whatever. Um, and I have a few other Cancer friends and my Cancer rising friends in my life. Um, but what's interesting here is that there's uh, maybe a significant change. Like one of the things that comes to my mind right away is that the changes around joint financial endeavors is shifting dramatically for Cancers with Pluto and the Sun entering the eighth. What I find fascinating, for example, Ashley's been on maternity leave for a couple of years from her work as an herbalist, although she's maintained like a once a week show on her on like YouTube. So she's gradually coming back to work this year. And that's like that dramatically shifts the picture of, like we, for a lot of years, we were partners in our business, yoga studio, herbal classes and offerings, seeing clients, and then me as an astrologer. So that it's interesting to me that this really matches with what's happening for Ashley this year in terms of like conversations we're having about the offerings we want to do together, or what our new roles are going to be now that she's coming back to work and blah, blah, blah. So powerful reassessment of where your values and resources overlap with those that you are in soul contracts with. And that could be a spouse or a loved one, but it could also be just the people in your life that that feature very strong give and takes or reciprocal dynamics where you have to work out the balance, the exchange, the duties, obligations, and sense of who's providing what and how. So that's a very powerful shift. It can also mean that there are like powerful new people or things happening in the collective that are coming into your life and asking you to participate in something. The eighth house, as we've said a bunch of times, is called the esteem of other people. And so when Pluto enters the eighth, I found it really curious last year that when Pluto entered the eighth for Ashley, she got invited to be a part of a project that was really about a new direction in the herbal industry. She got invited to be a consultant for it right as Pluto entered the eighth, and I was like, so that her advice was critical for people who are thinking about, how to develop new products that you might find on the shelf at your co-op, right? They say that Pluto in Aquarius will start coming in, and it's going to confer blessings upon Cancers by means of saying, hey, I think you have something really, remember Pluto means riches. I think you have something really rich to offer, or if there's some kind of exchange or collaboration that could occur that I'd really like to engage you on. Now, you may also have to go through a process of discerning where your own creative interests and directions are. With the full moon in Leo in the second, we can see that tension right away. That's like, as interesting as it might be to consult for people developing herbal products in the larger industry, what about, I don't know, like for Ashley, I'm thinking like, what about seeing herbal clients, which might be more about the creative values that you have and the resources that you want to develop that are more personal and have more to do with your own unique sense of calling, as opposed to the way that larger collectives are trying to engage you in collaboration. So that balance across the financial axis is really interesting. And then I think what it's pinging off from with Jupiter in the 11th is this question about, for Cancers, the Taurus 11th house suggests emotional, physical, worldly things that we are trying to nurture and cultivate or develop. Cancers are nurturers. So it's very important for Cancer rising people to feel like my goals and aspirations involve something that I'm devoted to, that I'm nurturing. Taurus is the exaltation of the moon in the 11th house. So the question also about what groups or communities, what larger social dynamics do I want to participate in that allow me to foster and nurture things I really care about? That's really important. It's a very deeply embodied question of community for Cancers this year. But then you've also got some really spacey opportunities coming in from Aquarius that may not be as embodied or as in line with your own creative center. And yet they're very good opportunities, right? So interesting balances that balancing and juggling that I see the Cancers going through.
You could see something like a narrative, like, I don't know if this is what's going on with Ashley, but like you get an opportunity to like form some kind of new online holistic co-op, right? That's an Aquarius type of thing. But your joy, and I think, for Cancers, Tauruses too, and with Jupiter and Taurus, is like not losing sight of like, how do I concretize that in a way that allows me to stay connected to my own sense of grounded embodiment and bring tangible, practical results from that. Like, it's really easy to start something that's like, yeah, people are buying this and doing this and all this online, but where do I interface with an individual client? How do I hear about their individual need? How do I hear about what's going on in their life in a way where I'm helping them within their system and their body? And I'm wondering if there are people that from this Jupiter in the 11th house who come in a way to help kind of ground that, to bring in the fertile ground of Taurus again, where it's like practical, embodied in earthy, even sensual, like bringing it back to the human senses ideas from the sort of, technological ether sphere of Aquarius. Ether sphere.
Yeah.
I just made that one up. Ether sphere.
I like that. I'm good. So the card that I drew is right in line with what we're talking about. For Cancers, I drew the 3 of Cups. So you'll notice that the theme is a group of women sort of raising their glasses in a very fertile looking space, like almost like a little garden grove or something. And they're raising their cups. They're sort of dancing in a circle. So first of all, I feel like the theme of the feminine embodied sort of goddess in groups, goddess in collaboration, but lifting their cups skyward too. So there, that Aquarian sense of joining with other people for higher ideals, something very earthy, sensual, and Taurian, but like, almost like where the intersection between women's spirituality, feminism, earthy, pagan, sensual, embodied activities or groups or ideas are coming together somehow. There is maybe some question here, right? Of, 3, what do they say? What's the like a third wheel, right?
Mhm.
So, you almost prefer to have 4 people than 3. Sometimes there could be a way in which you wonder if there's the potential for alienating some part of yourself. Everything's getting really excited, but be careful. That sometimes I feel like this is 3's a crowd. Is that the saying?
Yeah.
Something about this that makes me go, okay, this is a really nice embodied card. But like, for example, it's sometimes this card will come up when people are having affairs and there's a third person involved, or there's a problematic triangulation between 3 people in business together or something. Be a little bit careful of making sure you really carefully balance your own voice, your own needs, your own concerns, your own bottom line, but otherwise I feel like Cancers are looking at some very interesting points of collaboration and development with other people and groups and things that are exciting, but very feminine and embodied.
For sure.
Yeah. Shall we move on?
I mean, I'm never excited to get to Leo rising, Adam.
No, exactly. It's like Taurus rising for me. I get all excited.
Leo, me.
Exactly. Okay, so here we go. And it was funny, we were just recording our Leo rising horoscopes for 2024, and we just talked about this. So this is fresh on our minds. I'm going to let you start because you're the Leo.
So I'm going to start with saying one thing Adam and I were talking about is, Leo is a prominent sign, but not necessarily an extroverted or very social sign. I would give that to Gemini if I had to give it to any sign in the chart. That's usually the case with Geminis. But Leo tends to be very prominent, and we tend to also, without realizing it, because we sort of embody the archetypal sovereign, the archetypal king or queen, there can be a sense where we become self-reliant and then sometimes overly self-reliant. And I think that there's something about, especially our ascendant ruler moving into the 7th house with Pluto. This is a year where it's okay to come outside of the metaphorical palace, to open the gates and go outside and recognize that people love you, they want to support you, and that actually, in order to really thrive and start to really move forward in some pretty bountiful and amazing ways, especially in career with Jupiter sitting right up there at the top of the chart, you have to rely on community sometimes. You have to, I always think of for myself, I have to let people do certain things for my business or for my life that I don't really necessarily want to or know how to do well, but they're real experts in. And when they thrive and I thrive when that happens. But it's hard for me as a Leo to sort of open the palace gates and come outside and recognize, oh, there's a whole town out here, there's a whole community out here that really wants to be supportive of that. That's how I'm reading this right now, Adam. And I think especially with Jupiter sitting there right at the top angle of the chart, there's something about some real concrete blessings and new narratives that can come from Leo sort of opening to the town, the king opening to the town in that archetypal sense.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that we've got a the Pluto Sun entering the seventh, and the obviously the early full moon in Leo in the first, and then the T square to Jupiter in the 10th. And one of the things that Leos can be ruled by as a shadow is sort of like self-interest. Like that's the big shadow, right? And where we become overly identified with the role we play that grants us a sense of importance, which everyone needs, which is why we all have a sun sign in our chart. What role am I here to play? What ambitions and what role define the arc of my life, like the plot of a movie? Leos can get overly identified with that role, and the conflation will then eventually, naturally, it seeks differentiation. So the universe will have a way of severing your identification with that role, which can happen in a lot of ways: corruption, scandal, disappointment, falling short of the post that you're supposed to be filling. It can also happen through people that act as a mirror and help you see that there are different parts of yourself and that you're more than just the role you've been playing. What I love is the card that I drew is the Queen of Swords. So the Queen of Swords, first of all, is in some ways like it's the feminine with the kind of masculine air quality behind it. So when I think of this as the ability of, let's say, a very feminine version of Aquarius that comes along and says, through clear, differentiated, unbiased, logical, careful thinking, I am going to make you consider the ways in which you are different, or you're not the role that you think you are.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
And why am I doing that? So that you can have healthier, happier relationships with other people. It's like, I see this as the sort of differentiation for the sake of relating more openly, more fluidly with other people. That's hard because we don't think of Leo as an emotional sign. But the truth is that it's a deeply emotional sign. It's not like the water signs have the market cornered on emotion. By the way, fire is also like water. It's just, it's like, ever watch fire? It moves just like water, so there's a fluidity to both, and fire signs are often quite emotional. Emotional identification with the role you've been playing is not always logical, because you'll self-sabotage. Leos will self-sabotage by saying like, well, this is what I am, and how dare you challenge my sovereignty, But the Queen of Swords can come in, like, let's say we're talking about Pluto and Aquarius moving into the 7th, as this feminine presence that says, step back, look at yourself more objectively. And when you do so, what you're going to find is that you actually can have deeper, more meaningful relationships because you've opened your mind about who you are and about what's possible for you.
Adam, I would like to thank you for this free reading, for exactly what I needed to hear at this moment in time, because that's so what's going on in my life, though, in so many ways. And I'll give you a short example of this, which I don't mind sharing. I mean, I'll be vulnerable here. Is that I was identified for a long, and this is chart specific, by the way, but I'm a Leo rising, but there's a lot of my chart that denotes this too. I was identified for a long time with that role of the doer, savior, martyr. I will do it all. I will save you all. I will be the martyr for all. Well, guess what? It's really hard to have relationships when you're like that. And it doesn't allow space for other people to do for you and to feel useful and valid and needed in your life. And I have had to, especially in the last year, as I've gotten deeper and deeper into a wonderful relationship, let go of that feeling of like, I've got to do it all. I need to do this, because it doesn't leave room for another person to feel valid and needed, and that they can give, and they have things that to offer. And it's been a wonderful ego death, not altogether comfortable, but I'm realizing that in my own life too. And that's one way. I'm seeing that in other ways too, where it's like, I've seen myself in away for a certain time, and I have to be the person who does it, rather than seeing there are ideals I can inhabit that also allow me to allow others to give. There can be give and take with others too,
Mm.
that greatly enhances relationship. I mean, greatly enhances it.
Yeah, what I actually heard, I think it was Robert Schmidt that I heard describe Aquarius and Leo as a relationship between the king and the astrologer,
Hmm.
where the king is Leo, and that every king, like in all these old, kingdoms, even in let's say matriarchal cultures, the matriarchs had counselors, diviners. Maybe they were women, but the point being is that when you're a leader, you need advisors that can help you be objective, because the potential to make decisions rooted in your egoic identification with the post of power it's significant. You can't underestimate it, right? And so, as a Venus and Leo ruling my ascendant, like I'll tell you, there's really there's no one better for me my entire life that I've met than my wife for asking me important questions.
Yep. Yep.
Like critical moments,
Yeah.
All right. And those questions, the Queen of Sword to me is like the advisor to the king, right? And I don't mean that as a subordinate. I mean they're equal roles of power, really, and responsibility. And but she says, I think her role as, like, let's call her the astrologer, is to say, are there different ideas that you've not yet considered about how you can rule? And maybe that means organize your life, or think about yourself. And when we consider those ideas, I mean, think about the kings or queens or leaders that you really admire. They are ones that when good ideas come to them, they're not too proud to say, well, it wasn't my idea, so I can't accept it. It was someone else's, right? They recognize that there's a dyad between wise counsel
Yes.
and personal sovereignty. You need an exchange between both.
Yeah.
This is a year where I think Leos are going to advance tremendously and find tremendous openings insofar as they're able to take the counsel coming through the process or the persons in their life, the social process or the persons.
Adam, it makes me think of I don't know if you ever see the movies where Cate Blanchett plays Queen Elizabeth I, but in the second one, she consults John Dee, the famous mystic and her personal astrologer and guide. And it always just makes me laugh because, she's asking him, I think it's before the Spanish Armada is about to attack. And he's going, oh, the full moon is rising while Mars is taking the ascendant 3 days after your majesty's birth. And he's doing the whole astrologer thing. And she goes, yes, that is fascinating, but what does it mean? And I thought, God, if that isn't every astrologer and their client and through history,
yeah, totally.
But it had that give and take. It's a really nice way of looking at, like, she's trying to make an executive decision, but she needs some kind of counsel that comes from a wiser person that can offer her a bigger perspective. In that way. That scene just kept staying in my mind as you were describing that.
Yeah, there's such a beautiful dance between Leo and Aquarius, and it'll come up when we get to Aquarius too. We flip the signs in reverse. But let's move on to Virgo. We're going to put Virgo on the ascendant, and we see that the Sun Pluto's entered the 6th, so the Leo moon, full moon in the 12th, and pinging off from the T-square to Jupiter in the 9th. This is between January 20th and the 25th. The first thing that comes to my mind is, I think in terms of people I know and what they're going through. And then I use that as a starting point for understanding the archetype. Yeah. Immediately what comes to mind is my daughter, my older daughter, who's 8 years old, Virginia. She is a Virgo rising. And in January, almost right as this starts, she begins more like, she goes from like tumbling to like gymnastics, like actual gymnastics. She is so stoked about this, right? And you might say, well, what does that have to do with Aquarius in the 6th house? But the thing is that the 6th house was called the joy of Mars. And it is a house that was associated with, like, if you want to become an astrologer, I mean, a lot of us have to read hundreds and hundreds of charts, eventually thousands. If you want to do anything, they say, what, you need 10,000 hours before you become like masterful at something, right? Like that. If you want to be a gymnast or an athlete, you're going to do a lot of sweating. You're going to have some bumps and bruises, nicks and scrapes. The sixth house is like a fire. And when you walk into the sixth house, it will either burn you or it will become the fire that you enter as you passionately work toward things that you really, really care about.
Yes.
And maybe that's service to humanity and a sacrificial act as a servant. Maybe that's something you're developing like an apprenticeship and you're doing hundreds of readings for not a lot of money. The sixth house is sacrifice and hard work that you are not expecting to pay off now, but later. And in fact, if you don't learn how to live in the fire of the sixth house, you'll feel like you're trapped or enslaved, or you're becoming a victim of like misfortune and suffering. It's so much easier to work through sixth house transits when you have something that you're passionate, that you're sort of burning as you do.
Amen. Amen. I'm just getting really excited because I just am finishing Pluto in the sixth house, and it's exactly the type of feeling it was. It was like I had a goal in mind. I didn't know how to get to that goal, and it was made very clear by the transits that I didn't know how to get to the goal. So I needed to take a diverted path that I did not expect to take to get to it. But I always kept in mind why I was doing this. And it was hard. And there was a lot of, underworld journey that happened in that. There was a lot of facing myself in ways that were not altogether comfortable, healing traumas that were difficult to face. And I had to work through those with some really helpful people. But ultimately, it leaves me feeling like, wow, it was worth it. It was really, really worth it. And, I hate to bring back Lord of the Rings, Adam, but I kind of love to do it. But like Michael and I are rewatching the movies, over the course of the break, and I forget that Frodo it's the perfect move for this time of year, right?
It is. We just finished Two Towers last night.
Yeah, we just finished on Christmas night. We finished Two Towers, and I was like, God, these are so good. But what I forget about it always is Frodo just walks in and picks up the ring. He doesn't know what that's going to be. He walks in the door, the ring's lying there, and he just picks it up. He doesn't know the journey that's going to take him on, but there's a mission that drives him that whole time for all the arduous stuff that they go through and that they have to shift and change. And he's very much changed by that at the end of the last movie, in the last book. But I feel like this is a little bit of the beginning of this transit for Virgos, which is this: you may pick up something without knowing it that is going to take you on a quest that diverts you from where you thought you were going to go. And if you can keep in mind why you're doing that, it will feel satisfying. The journey feels satisfying in of itself. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what's the shadow is for Virgos? The audacious idea that you are super, super special. Not because of what you perfect, or not because of how meticulous or careful or controlled you are, not because of how productive or useful you are, not because of how much you know or how much craft or skill you develop, but because, just like super Mr. Rogers, because you are you. And that's the Leo in the 12th house. There's a shadow that Virgos don't always understand. Everyone has a 12th house shadow that we work with on an archetypal level. And for Virgos, it's one very powerful thing I see my daughter dealing with. My younger daughter is the Leo sun with Mercury in Leo. Let's just say, the movie Frozen has played like 400 times in my house. So as soon as Frozen comes on, she becomes Elsa. She just steps into that role and she's just singing, and my Virgo rising daughter looks at her and goes, "It's offensive that you think you're so great." Like it's offensive.
What have you done to earn that greatness?
Yes.
Like how?
Yeah, right. Exactly. And like, okay, there's something maybe irritating about like I'm a Venus Leo. So maybe there's something irritating about us, But the point is that in many ways, the arc of a Virgo rising lifetime is to gradually learn how to inhabit that place of utter pure sunshine for no reason, with no skill that's justified it, with no moral or spiritual purity that's gotten you there. It's just, I'm a little being of sunshine. And that's that, Virgo is like, it's so close to that journey into the underworld in the solar year. It's like Persephone going down. And I was just talking to Emma Frey, who we're doing this Rising series with, and she mentioned in the video that we did that one of the archetypes for Virgo is the story of Beauty and the Beast. So you have these polarized characters of light and dark. And, it's funny how the Virgo has the transformative power in the maiden stories of Beauty and the Beast to transform a hideous masculine figure back into a regal one. But that is actually a projection onto another human being, that's representative of what Virgo can draw forth from themselves.
Yeah.
I'm not impure. I'm pure. Pure as the sun. I'm not, I don't have to be a perfect at something. I'm perfect just because I am. So like that sort of turning yourself from beast into beauty is also part of what Virgos are embodying. And when I look at this, I just think, okay, the thing that's starting to happen is Virgos are finding something by means of which to sacrifice and transform their lives, because there's going to be dedication, sacrifice, labor, hard work, intensive care put into things that, really light you up, that get you really excited, that maybe join you with other people. And yet the shadow of the full moon in Leo in the 12th house is saying, don't forget that you are already a fantastic individual who has nothing to prove, and make sure that you're not trying to, like a blacksmith, like forge yourself into something, because a sort of Platonic idea of what you could be if you sacrifice enough over a long enough period of time is entering your mind. Don't forget that whatever you forge yourself into, the essence was already there from the beginning. And so there's interesting tension that'll come up around ego and self-worth and value for Virgos as this kind of sacrificial process is starting to enter your life.
I just want to get up and cheer and say a big amen to that, Adam. That was like, I hope every Virgo who listens to this puts that in a clip and listens to it on repeat all the time, because it's so quintessentially the sign and the issue of the sign. And I think it's just a paraphrasing of a line from A Course in Miracles that I love, and I have Saturn in Virgo, so I need to hear it a lot. Is you need do nothing, you need sacrifice nothing to receive the love of God.
Yeah,
and that is a really, and I think because I have the nodal axis in Virgo and Pisces too. There's a sense of just that who you are is the natural light, but I'm not going to go too far into that because I don't want to amend that too much. That was beautiful. That was really beautiful.
Well, the card that I drew, I should mention, is the 3 of Wands. But then I had this weird hit with Virgos where I felt like I had to draw another. So I drew another, and I got paired with it, the 8 of Wands. So you see this person kind of looking out on the horizon with some resources gathered. And then the second card, which really shows sort of swift, uninhibited progress, all on the level of fire. Now, you might ask, like, again, how does Aquarius in the 6th house, what does this have to do with anything? Well, let's use the case of my daughter for an example. How is an Aquarius reflecting her sort of idealizing of becoming a great gymnast and all the work that has to go into it? Think of the myth of Ganymede. This is the water pourer in the constellation of Aquarius. He is the epitome of human potential, of what you can be. And so think about it. Now, I'm not saying my daughter wants to be a gold medalist, but that's Ganymede, a gold medalist of a human. And that idea of my highest potential as a human that I can reach is Aquarian. It doesn't matter if it's on an athletic level or on the level of big political ideals that the whole society could reach, like a gold medal for society, Either way, it starts holding up society.
I can't resist. Society.
Oh my God, I just had to do it. Sorry if I blasted everyone's eardrum. It has been so long. I just needed to let it out. Thank you. You helped me.
I'm here, man.
Oh my God. Okay. But there's something here that says there's a potential. And then the Jupiter in the 9th house reflects this kind of learning. Let's embody the potential through understanding and learning and developing my mind and like a craft or developing knowledge of something. And then the Leo in the 12th house is the shadow of like, maybe I'm doing all of this because I have low self-esteem, right? Yeah. Or something like that. So anyway. Okay. So let's take a quick break since we are through Virgo. And I am going to, we'll move along to Libra. But first, what I want to do is tell all of you how you can, access the Kickstarter. So let's go over and let's see. We were at 1,099 backers at the start of this. and now we are at 1,109. So,
Yes.
and we crossed the minimum funding goal. So it's an all or nothing funding. And we crossed that threshold, which means no matter what happens from this point forward, the lights will stay on in 2024. Yay! Woo! Yay!
Oh, Aquarian.
I know,
the
right?
light. The light will be
yes,
shepherded through the dark. Yep.
So the lights stay on, which is good. But if we want to build that affordable reading service, right? If we want to keep building cool things, we need to reach that 1,777 goal. So if you have not already, please consider backing the channel. You can find the link in the live stream or tag to the top of the comment section or in the description of the video. So, it's amazing that, like, if you would have asked me when I started this, by the way, let me just tell a little story. When I started the Kickstarter 10 years ago, I got a couple hundred backers and $26,000. And for me, as someone who was making barely anything, that was incredible. That was an absolutely mind-blowing thing, that the content that I made day in and day out was worthy of being paid for. And that, because, at that time I was really making content to just try to create a platform and get clients, right? I mean, that was the goal. And it started shifting where I said, you know what, I put so much time and energy into this, and I believe it's a service that is valuable of being a part of my revenue model rather than just something I'm doing utterly for free and spinning my wheels, right? And so the Kickstarter came as a way of trying to say, I think that what I'm doing is worth asking people to support. And then it gradually grew, right? And it grew to the point where, now we have a staff of 11 people. And this funding goal that we set of $200,000, understand first and foremost that about 10% comes off the top of that, and then we pay taxes. So immediately you're chunking it down. And that projected estimate is basically it doesn't even cover payroll for the year, right? For 11 people. So I like to say that because sometimes people see that big number and they're like, oh, like you're rolling in it. But it's really different when you have 11 staffers on and you're trying to support a multi-dimensional operation. So I just want to say thank you to everyone, because this model, when I came up with it, was something I wanted to do rather than trying to set up a paywall or a subscription or something like that. I just was like, I just want to put it out there and let this spiritual content meet people where they're at, and trust that there's going to be people who value it enough to put something back. And then I feel supported, and then I can build cool things. And there's we have tens of thousands of people who watch this channel, millions and millions of views that we got over the years, 2,000 videos on the channel, a 5-day-a-week content for 10 years, 3 hours of work plus per day that go into the production of every single video, a lot of prayer, a lot of sixth house, right? This is where my Jupiter and Saturn are located. None of it would happen if at the end of the year, people who liked this didn't sit back and go, this is good. I can pitch in something to acknowledge an energy exchange that's come into my life. This is a service that's been valuable to me in my life on any level, as a student, as a spiritual seeker, whatever. And because of the goodness of even just a small percentage of the audience, we've been able to do extraordinary things. Like truly, we've built a school. We've built an entire community with a staff of people. We provide jobs for people in the industry. And now we're starting to develop this next really big step, which is to provide graduates with a platform from which to get experience. Because the thing that's really, really hard is, okay, and I said this on the video today, like you go to acupuncture school, you're going to be an incredible acupuncturist. A lot of graduates will be incredible. They still may not have the support to develop a client practice. How do you get that? There's no larger industry for people in our kind of work. So what I'm trying to do with this success is use the success of the platform to build success for other people, because it's not fair that the only people who should be able to do well in astrology are people who are charismatic content creators on Instagram or Facebook, or you know what I mean? Like, okay, so whatever, that's been a gift that I have, probably because maybe I have a Leo in me, so I can be like a showman or whatever. But a lot of people don't have that. That's not their jam.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that they shouldn't be able to read charts for people and help people along the way as astrological counselors or teachers or whatever else. So if there's anything we can do with this success, to me, it is about using it to showcase talented people who need experience and need a place to get started. So that's a deep part of the value and why we're pushing to get to 1,777. It's not so I can just pad my pockets. I want to build cool shit. That's what I want to do. So anyway, thank you again to the 1,109 backers that we have received the support of. We so appreciate it. If you are able to and you have not yet donated, we're trying to get to 1,777. I believe that if we get there, my estimate is that if we get to that number, we will have enough to start building the platform out for the affordable reading service that will give graduates experience, that will give affordable price points to the community.
I can't say how important that is, Adam. And just speaking from years of training yoga teachers, I always tell them, I'm like, you need real world experience with the class. You need to teach bodies. You need to teach people who are practicing. And I think with astrology is the same type of thing. You can be very knowledgeable and really talented at working with people, but you need the experience of sitting in front of hundreds and hundreds of charts to get a feel for the experience, and then the experiential intuition that comes that allows you to have a sense of facility with the work. It's such an important thing to have in this type of work.
Yeah, it is. And like, that's the other thing that we're building in the year ahead is like, well, you're a perfect example, Alex. Not that you didn't have your own thing going, but I was like, shit, Alex is so talented. And like, I want to help Alex build his platform. And I also need a wingman for horoscopes because they make me want to put my head in an oven. You know, when you do 12 horoscopes in a row and you're trying to on the spot come up with things to say, it is so draining. I can't even I would get done with those horoscopes, whether I was recording them or doing them live or whatever. And when I was doing 12 by myself, I'd get done and I would literally need to like shower, lay down, like wring my fists at the heavens because it's exhausting.
It is.
And I don't, and like, of course, the thing that perpetuates the need for them is that they're an access point for so many people. Like people need horoscopes because they're personal. And so I appreciate the need that's there for them. But you know, you've done two things. Having someone like you has helped lessen some of the stress load I carry with horoscopes, but it's also helped me help you build your work because I really appreciate your work.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And it is fun so, you know, one of the things that I think is especially important as you get into sort of a collaborative space, like something with Pluto and Aquarius, is collaboration is the way to go. And I've always seen and appreciated that, even in, you know, because I've known you from the early days when you were sitting in your little blue room in Maryland, you know, doing, you know, that I've known you from all of that. And when, you know, one of the things I observe about astrologers is not dissimilar to yoga teachers is that I always think it can be very isolating. You're sitting there with your clients and your charts and you're in this sort of zone. And when we get together every month, I'm like, wow, we're collaborating. And you're helping me get started in something that I never thought a million years I would do as a profession, or you know, even just read charts in addition to the other stuff that I do. So it's like this sense of expansion and helping each other out that is so important. But also, I really appreciate that when you're doing horoscopes, you need someone to riff ideas off of and not have to sort of draw it in. Because then what happens, Adam, is you and I start getting into our thesaurus from the 1850s.
That's
and we
right.
use words like a foot and coffer.
In coffers.
And we start to, all of a sudden you sound like you're like, you know, reciting Dickens as you're like, you know.
Exactly. Oh my God. Well, it's funny because like the way my brain works is, you know, for whatever reason, when it comes to talking about horoscopes, you know, and you have to kind of keep a rhythm and go along and try to say a lot of relevant, concise things, nail big topics, keep them broad, not too specific, because the more specific you go, the more you're going to lose a huge swath of the audience that won't relate. And this is because we're not working with the specifics of a birth chart. That as you're going through the horoscopes, one of the things that helps me is when I hear what you're saying about it, suddenly little alterations or deviations or modifications or like different angles or creative thoughts start popping into my mind that otherwise wouldn't be there. And that's where you're going to get me at my best, you know, and I know that. So it's been such a joy to have you. Well, anyway, as we're sitting here and just like bro high-fiving,
girl, you go, girl.
Yeah, dude. So here's what I think we should do. Let's tell people one more time how to find the Kickstarter. Thank you
Yes.
again to everybody who's already contributed. If you haven't yet, you can find the link on our website, nightlightastrology.com. Click on the 2024 Kickstarter link. Come study with us, guys. If you like this kind of stuff, if you like learning and growing and having your mind blown and transforming your life with astrology, come study in our programs. They are the best thing I've ever built in my entire life, outside of my kids and, my marriage with my wife. It's like those are 1A, and then 1B is the astrological courses that we offer. It's a wonderful community of learning. Our classes are all on sale through the Kickstarter. You have until New Year's Eve at midnight. We're trying to get to 1,777 backers. We're getting closer. We are a lot closer. So again, thank you to everyone who's already contributed. And if you haven't yet, head over and pitch in. All right. On that note, are you ready to advance to Libra?
Let's do it.
All right, let's go.
We're in the dark of the year.
Yeah.
It's Libra.
Okay, so here is Libra rising. And we're looking at the full moon in Leo on January 25th. Actually, let me get my little banner back up so that we can have a date in front of us. Here we go. We're looking at that full moon, but we're looking at it as it comes off from, as it develops right after, I should say, the Sun-Pluto conjunction, which for Libras is in the 5th house. And the full moon on the 20th, that's from January 20th. And the 25th, you get the full moon in Leo in the 11th, and creating a T-square with Jupiter in Taurus in the 8th house. I'm going to draw a card and let you start rapping about this one while I do it.
This is interesting to me. I think that when Pluto moves into the 5th house, I'm going to say something that sounds a little dark, but I don't mean it dark. I think it shows us about the shadows of pleasure. And that can be a good thing, or that can be something that we see, like where we're sort of getting obsessed with something that brings us creative pleasure. It needs to be a certain way, or whatever way we conceive of it. But I feel like there's something that's happening here around allowing yourself to really look at the things that bring you personal sense of instinctual pleasure. That can be artistic, that can be sexual, that can be creative in any number of different ways. It could be something like, I think of myself as a musician, and this isn't the transit happening for me, but I really want to get back into playing piano and composing music this year. Like, there's a drive in me that really needs to get back to a sort of instinct that I have to work with music in that way. And I'm wondering if, like, in a sort of, there's a way when Pluto's moving into Aquarius where you're starting to take a look at, like, wait a second, let me look from a more detached perspective from the aerial view at the things that sort of instinctually draw me into enjoyment for myself, which can be tough for Libras, because a lot of times Libras are sort of, I like to call it the Libra tap dance of just kind of want to make sure everybody's okay, and I don't want to make sure no one's mad and everybody feels like they're on an even page of harmony. Pluto here will ask you to, I think, to really differentiate yourself in a way that feels personally instinctual, is the word I keep coming back to with Pluto. And I think that that kind of jives with this Jupiter in the 8th house, which will maybe asking you to reconceptualize the narratives you have about what comes to you through others, or even about the narratives you have about the deeper soul contracts in your life. Can I actually let myself act on my deeper desires? What are the healthy ones and what aren't they? And then is there a way where I can find some sense of harmony with that, and what I do need to rely on other people for in order to bring my creative visions into the world? This, for some reason, Adam, this is just a fascinating configuration to me with this Jupiter in the 8th house. There's something here about great blessings that can flow from other people, but being discerning about, like, what are the shadows of pleasure that are healthy for me, and what are the shadows of pleasure that might ultimately be some kind of harmful thing that I may want to. And that's a sermon strikes me as very needed at this time.
Yeah. For Libras, I can't help but think of the fact that this year is about recurring South Node Libra eclipses in your 1st house. Yeah. Those come through, I think it's March 25th, I want to say, is the lunar eclipse in Libra. And then you have one again in, I want to say, like, maybe it's late September or early October. I can't remember.
October.
Yeah.
Early October, yeah.
Yeah. So a couple of eclipses with the South Node in the first house. North Node is in the seventh. For whenever I think of the South Node in the first house, one of the things I think about is how are we leaving the world behind in some way. I think of K2 in Indian astrology, in other words, as the South Node relates to detachment or a sort of impulse toward spiritual or transcendental things, otherworldly things, as opposed to things that take us into the body. With Pluto entering the fifth house, which was called the joy of Venus and the house of the goddess, and a house that was broadly associated with pleasure. And we now associate that house with creativity because it's been conflated with the sign of Leo, which is incorrect. In ancient astrology, the house is really called the house of good fortune, and it has to do with those things in our life that add to or support our happiness and our experience of life as joyful. When Pluto enters that house, it is as though the definition of like the what defines pleasure and happiness is ready to go through a really significant change. I would see this as like a for example, if you're a Libra that struggles with addiction or codependency or things that are meant to give pleasure but that are slowly tearing you apart, this is the potential for a shift that will help you reconsider what real happiness looks like, healthy happiness.
Reciprocal happiness.
Yes, good. Yeah, that's great. Reciprocal happiness. There's also maybe a question, the question of how much should you rely on what other people have or are in possession of versus how much should come from you? With the Jupiter in the eighth house, I think, for example, of the blessings and support that might want to be flowing your way, whether or not you can open yourself, maybe even like it's hard for your pride or something to accept help from other people. So anyway, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to the card that I drew, which is the Judgment card. What's interesting about this card is, I typically read it in like one of two ways. One is that this is about awakening from the dead, being called and summoned to life, eternal life, real life, heavenly life. Especially if you're coming out of a period of feeling dead, or there's some theme of feeling lifeless. This is an animating card. It's almost like the shadow of it would be like the apocalyptic reanimating of zombies or something. But this is about bringing dead things to life. And I just wonder if for Libras, the question of what embodied worldly happiness looks like, what positive, healthy, reciprocal relationships look like, in a way that is animating and physically embodying, isn't what this year is about, or this month is about. And again, I think that goes back to the eclipses in the first house, which can signal some tendency to be dissociated from yourself or your own body at its worst. What are those higher, heavenly, beautiful things that can call you back to life? That's what comes to my mind for Libras.
Adam, I also am thinking about that North Node in the seventh house, an assertion of some kind. Like a lot of time, I could hear a Libra because my Libra moon is kind of saying, well, I get, my satisfaction by being there for others and making sure everybody's happy. That's my, well, yeah, but also, that over time, yourself begins to become listless and void of energy in some way. And sometimes the way we gain back power is by saying, yeah, I love being here for you. And I also love allowing others to be there for me. I also love asserting what I need. And you can see there's so many examples of that in literature and movies where like someone has felt like they're a little meek and they want to make sure everybody's okay. And there's something that just says, no, enough. And they assert themselves, and you can feel life force re-enter their system. I've seen that in movies. I've seen that in energy work over the years too. And people sort of say, no, this far, no further. This is what I need. You see the life and the chi, the prana come back into their body.
It also strikes me as an interesting thing is that you could benefit from dead people. I know that sounds weird, but the Judgment card calling the life force from the dead, rising the dead up for the final judgment. With Jupiter in the 8th house, a place of inheritance, a place of blessings that come from people who have passed. That's really interesting. I mean, that would be a very specific thing that probably only a few would experience, but just the idea that, symbolically speaking, things that look dead are coming back to life.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to Scorpios. So for Scorpio, we have full moon in Leo in the 10th. Of course, the sun Pluto is entering the 4th around January 20th. And then we're creating a T-square with Jupiter in the 7th. So, as we're starting to hit the opposites of the signs we started with, it's interesting to see how the orientation just sort of reverses itself. For Aquarians, or excuse me, for Scorpios, the first thing that comes to my mind is when Pluto enters the 4th house, it's like the tectonic plates beneath the earth are shifting. Aquarius in the 4th house, to me, speaks of the need for some kind of ancestral or familial revolution. There's death and rebirth coming in around the family, the story of your family of origin. This can be births and deaths in the family. It can mean moving or relocating. It can be, marriages that are significant. It can be about, there's tremendous change happening because my conservative family just found out that one of the kids is gay, and all of a sudden they're having to open their minds, or something like that. I think the potential for constellational shifting that's broad and ideological, and also about recognizing that there's a higher potential to be embodied around home and family right now for Scorpios. It can also be like, for example, there's probably a bunch of Scorpios out there going to have Pluto enter the 4th as their kids leave home for the first time. Yeah. Now home is different. You're an empty nester, or as you retire and now all of a sudden you have more time at home. But significant change, transformation coming in around that space throughout the whole year. But this will be an important like staccato in the music. You could see that there's tension being created with the shifts happening around home and family that are collective, that have to do with the group and the way in which you're sort of socially entangled with other people at the roots of your life, and then who you're trying to become that's utterly individual out in the world. There's an interesting tension there. And then that runs through this very, sort of embodied, rich, fertile Jupiter in the 7th house of love and relationships, who's on its way to create this powerful opening in April with the conjunction of Jupiter and Uranus. So, it's an interesting set of themes that Scorpios are working with. And I think probably it all runs through the 4th house for the most part.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, for some reason I keep getting, and it could be because I watched, what was it? What's the third Indiana Jones with Sean Connery? I'm drawing. I just watched it last night. I can't think of it, but
Last Crusade.
Last Crusade. Yeah, and I was thinking a lot about the Grail legend here. The idea of like there's something about the Pluto when it makes a journey through the bottom of the chart. What I've often noticed, and this is going to sound dramatic, guys, but I don't mean it to sound this dramatic. It's like the chasm opens. There's something that opens, and all of a sudden, what feels familiar or things that may have felt precious begin to fall into it. But there's a sense where, like, if you can allow what needs to degenerate, to allow those things to fall in, that there's a rebirth that comes from understanding a bigger ideal, a bigger illumination that comes from that might just be as simple as something like, hey, I'm really sad that I'm an empty nester, but I've always wanted to turn that bedroom into some sort of specialized room in my home that I've always wanted, or something like that. There could be something as simple as that, but it's the allowing of the sort of the Pluto to open up the ground and swallow up what it needs to swallow up in order to recognize that there's some bigger thing that's coming through in the private sphere of your life that relates to your prominence in the world. I've said this before about Scorpio risings, but I need to say it again. It's always interesting that Leo is the 10th house for a very private sign, for a sign that is, generally likes to be in its own internal space, that likes to have its own internal space, very protected in a lot of ways. There's some way where that shift in your private personal space maybe allows a greater sense of prominence or comfort with prominence, or the beginning of that process to happen here.
There we go. Sorry, I was muted.
Mm.
The card that I drew for this one is the Knight of Swords. Anytime you see a knight come in, I mean, look at the action, right? It's just like, okay, there is vigorous energy coming in. And so when I think about this in relation to Aquarius at the roots, and Jupiter Uranus in the seventh, the Knight, of course, the swords are the suit that's associated with air. And so, first of all, a revolution of ideas and mind and intellect suggested by Pluto and Aquarius at the fourth house. When the plates shift, I think about, for example, when I was in when Jupiter had entered Gemini, Ashley and I went to we went to Costa Rica, and we were there for I want to say it was like a 7.8 on the Richter scale earthquake. It was massive.
Wow.
And yeah, where were we? I'm trying to remember the name of the town. Oh, I can't remember it. Nosara. So we were in Nosara, and
the big yoga center there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. We visited that. So the ground was, we were sitting there and we were reading our morning devotion together. Like, we were reading this, out of this book that we've used in the past. And we were reading about Indra's net and the interconnectedness of all things, and this idea of Indra's net. It was really, and all of a sudden everything started shaking, and Ashley was sitting on a chair, and right behind her was a huge glass framed painting, way up on a shelf, of surfers or something. We were staying in this guy's place that I knew, who let us stay there. He owned a little, a small little bungalow, and he let us stay there. And this thing fell off the shelf and dropped a foot behind Ashley's chair and smashed on the ground, all the glass.
Oh, Jesus.
And I'll just never remember, I'll always remember just grabbing her, and we ran out onto the deck because everything started shaking. And I looked at the ground, and the ground was rolling. It was like the ground had turned to liquid, and it was rolling. That's what I think about when I think about the Knight of Swords and Pluto coming into your fourth house as a Scorpio. It's very vigorous energy that's shifting the roots of your life and what supports you. And there could be a little bit of a holy God, the foundation is shifting, but it lasted 7 seconds, or no, it maybe 15 seconds. And then it was all over. And then there were these shock waves that would come around. We'd be sitting, and all of a sudden there'd be just, I'd be oh my God, it's starting again. And then it would die down, and my heart would flutter. I feel there's going to be shock waves throughout the year, shifting your roots as a Scorpio, and introducing this very vigorous energy. Don't forget that your relationships are seeking a more stable ground to work from. And that's a promise that's there, as long as you are able to work with the tumultuousness of the roots shifting so dramatically. I think in order to do that, you have to, so I feel like Scorpios are good in the ER of life. It's if you want a Scorpio in the ER.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of make sure that you take breaks. Don't stay in the intensity the whole year, even though there's going to be a lot of galvanizing energy to make really big changes. Remember that Jupiter and Taurus in your relationships is a grounded place to go to this year. And remember that, the ultimate thing that's also being reflected here in the full moon in Leo in the 10th house is a more fully realized, creatively individuated sense of self that wants to show itself in the world. If you get too lost in all of the foundational changes that are happening, you'll miss some of the greater stability that's trying to come forth.
Agreed. It's really interesting, Adam. I think that, did we lose Adam? Oh, there he is. Okay. I was just reflecting on, with Pluto in the fourth house, and, there might be something about also taking a sort of bird's eye view of patterns and, systems that have developed from your ancestry, from your family, And as those start to shift, it does feel like the basis of who you are starts to implode in a way. It's like there's an identity that begins to really fall through the cracks there. But ultimately, Jupiter and Taurus to me is such a life-giving, stabilizing, motherly like placement, where there's something about, like, if you can allow yourself to disidentify, scary as it can be, maybe from a more like, cerebral level from some of the patterns of the family, there's a gestating life force that's coming into your relationships that ultimately feels much more grounded and much more embodied in a lot of ways.
Right. I mean, that's why the warning that I see at the Knight of Swords is like, even if there's a metaphorical earthquake, don't stay in the ER. Like,
Yeah.
even though you may feel very comfortable there, there's, people in the world need to, there's going to be a need for a grounded, stable, like happy external presence.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So let's go on to Sagittarius.
Sagittarius.
So we get the full moon in the 9th, Pluto and the sun entering the 3rd, and the T-square with Jupiter in Taurus in the 6th. Now, this is between January 20th and the 25th. We said something very similar for Geminis, which is that these are the liminal spaces, the metacosmia, the cadent houses, and they really point to this year being a transitional space. I like to say that when Pluto enters the 3rd house, really any outer planet, or even to a certain extent Saturn and Jupiter, they will bring about some kind of cultural reform, which could also be described as environmental reform or revolution. Why? Well, the 3rd house, like, what is culture? Let's actually, here's something I like doing. You guys know I like doing this. What is the etymology of the word culture? The tilling of land, act of preparing the earth for crops, from Latin cultura, a cultivating, figuratively care, an honoring, from past participle stem of colere, to tend, to guard, to till, to cultivate. And it has to do also with the rearing of a crop, the act of promoting growth in plants, and the production of bacteria or other microorganisms in a suitable environment, thinking of like a culture sample. So why do we describe the 3rd house as culture? Because the 3rd house is the lunar house, and it was associated with the folk relations and culture of the people that lived in a village or city. Like, like the local, it's like, do you remember the show Cheers?
Oh my, yeah.
Right?
Whenever people come to visit us in Boston, they want to go down and see where the real Cheers bar was.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Where everybody knows your name,
Everybody knows your name, exactly.
That is a 3rd house kind of sitcom.
Yeah.
Because it's about what's familiar, and it's about the culture you inhabit. That's like, I would say that culture is like a Boston culture, right? That's kind of like a Boston bar culture or something like that.
Oh yeah.
So when Pluto enters your 3rd house, the first thing I would say is that the culture of your life is about to change. That can happen in so many different ways. People travel to foreign countries, they get introduced to different cultures, they become more open-minded to trying new things. The culture changes in their life. Subtly, maybe slowly. You start becoming more open-minded to the way of different people and different ways of relating to the earth and so forth. So I think of this as a major cultural change for Sagittarians. But there's also, our egos are invested in the beliefs that we have, the higher beliefs that guide our life. And so there's some tension between those guiding beliefs and the way that they grant us a sense of importance in life, and a kind of a cultural transformation and an encouragement of open-mindedness that's being stimulated that could also challenge our beliefs if you're a Sagittarius. And I think that it pings off from Jupiter in the 6th in Taurus, which is so fertile in saying, what are you cultivating? What are the crops you're trying to grow in the earthy, sensual world? And what kind of new ideas or open-mindedness, what kind of new culture is needed? And how is this challenging or shifting your established beliefs and the investment that your ego has in them?
Yeah, I love that. I think of Jupiter and Taurus, when we're Taurus is cultivating crops also in a one of the reasons Tauruses are often given the idea of being so, fussy and sort of stagnant is because in an archetypal sense, in the middle of the archetypal spring in the chart, they're trying to keep a very exact set of conditions stable in order that new life can grow. And, I always give the analogy of when I was a kid, my dad would start his garden inside in April because in Massachusetts in April, it's still too cold to put, seedlings outside. There's a very, very specific type of environment in which life can grow. And it's, anyone who's ever tried planting seeds before, it's hard at first to get all of those right in order for that to really happen. And I think that there's something related here to this shift in the paradigms through which you see your everyday environment or see your life. This is Pluto in the sun, and particularly Pluto in the third house, that feels like it's okay to take a little time to get the conditions right for what you're wanting to grow, for those new beliefs to grow, for that new idea to grow. Because Aquarius there's a sort of zeal that comes to Aquarius sometimes. And I think with Pluto in there, it can really accent that of like, I want the new paradigm now. I want the new idea now. I want the ideal now. And I think that Jupiter and Taurus is saying, especially is playing the T-square between the sun and the moon here, take your time to really get the conditions right for them to germinate properly. And then you will see bountiful crops coming from it.
It's interesting. I drew a card, and then again, I felt inclined to draw a second. For Sages, I drew. Oops! I've switched cameras. That's what happened. Okay, I see. My one camera must have run out of battery. Okay. Nine of Wands, excuse me, which shows a fellow looking rather beat up and exhausted, maybe paranoid or defensive, looking over his shoulder. But also, we're one card away from the finish line, 10 of Wands, which is also a big act of endurance and perseverance. But this card often comes up when it suggests that you might feel a little bit beat up or battered, or like you've been doing a lot of hard work. And this is a card that quite frequently comes up when persistence, effort, determination, focus, courage to finish something or to stand strong when facing adversity is required. So I see this as a positive. But then I drew a second card and I said, well, I need some qualifications. And then Queen of Pentacles came up. Queen of Pentacles is Jupiter and Taurus in the 6th for sure. So when I look at this, I think, okay, well, what are you having to endure? What are you having to stand strong and work on behalf of? And it's something very earthy that Jupiter and Taurus is working on in the 6th house. Could be something around money, around family, around kids, or around building your material wealth or your material substance or security. It could be about what you're nurturing or fostering that requires, careful tending, like a garden. It's something very earthy that requires a lot of energy, focus, and sacrifice. So you put these two together. And I see that as this is really speaking to me about Jupiter in the 6th. It's like you're working hard and maybe even protecting something you've been working on. And I would say Pluto in Aquarius might be asking this 9 of Wands to also keep your mind open to what could help you. Keep your mind open, because this guy might be a little paranoid at times, a little defensive or guarded, because you have something worth guarding right here in the Queen of Pentacles, Jupiter and Taurus. And that's why the ego comes in and says, oh, I've been defending something or working on something. And open-mindedness is maybe hard because there's a lot of ego investment in the way you've been doing things, the way you've been looking at things, the beliefs you have and how they've been guiding some kind of process that you've been caring for, something you've been tending. But open-mindedness and perseverance, working together, will help you get through something, I think.
Nice.
All right. Let's go on to Capricorn. We're coming down the home stretch of our last 3 signs. We have the full moon January 25th and Leo in the 8th. We are seeing the Sun Pluto entrance into the 2nd house, and the full moon on the 25th, they are creating a T-square with Jupiter in the 5th house. You want to start us on this one? I'll get a card ready.
Well, I think Pluto moving into Aquarius in the 2nd house, Pluto does mean riches. That can be some powerful resources that start to appear for you. I think that, you could see the shadow side of that too, where it's like, Adam, you gave a great example once, and I think it's just applicable here where, if you suddenly make a lot of money, or a lot of money comes into your life, like, are you prepared? Do you have the systems in place in order to handle that amount of money? Do you have the counselors and the, you know, the guidance that you need in order to handle that? I could see, you know, that's one way that could happen with actual money or with resources, or even just a change in the way you value yourself or your self-worth that shifts so dramatically. It's like, wait a second, I got to make sure there are systems in place here that I can hold that amount of energy. And the sense of, you know, this Jupiter in Taurus mediating a T-square between your second and eighth houses from the fifth house, that there's something of not losing sight of the things that give you embodied pleasure, that give you embodied sense of enjoyment, that give you a sense of sensually and, you know, being able to partake of the world. There's something here where it could get a little bit, I think, so much could come so quickly, or there's such a feeling of rush of power or shift in the way the power is structured in your sense of self-worth, or even just your personal resources, to not lose sight of the things that ground you and that ground you creatively. And that's a really important outsource or sort of release valve for a lot of that energy that can come rushing in. And then the moon in Leo in the eighth house, you know, that, you know, looking at where you draw from others and where you can be an individual in that sense. So like, not just having people just like giving to you, but like, who do I take things from? Where do I take them from? What are the structures that I have in place to funnel what comes to me from the correct people that respect myself as an individual, respect me as an individual, and not just like wherever the resources come from, I go and take those, or I go and take. Just being discerning with that, not losing sight of like what really grounds you. That Jupiter will really make itself known in that way.
Yeah, I love this. This is such an interesting. I drew two cards because, again, I just the first one I was like, oh, interesting, and then I felt compelled to draw a second one. So the first card that I drew is the Magician, and you know, if you think about Pluto going into the second house with Jupiter in the highly creative fifth, what comes to my mind is, especially when it comes to things like business, money, resources, what are you conjuring up this year? Like there's a sense of creative empowerment and ingenuity, and in like almost like an inventive, resourceful quality that's bringing some kind of, you know, transformation around money, around resources. Maybe your employment is changing. Maybe you're launching your own business or something. There's a very creative, fruitful quality here, like big creative endeavors. However, what I found really interesting was I drew the second card because I was trying to understand the moon in the eighth, the full moon, and what that might be signifying in the month of January, but also maybe as a kind of foreshadowing for the rest of the year. And the card I drew is the High Priestess, which is the second major arcana. So I randomly drew the first and second, which go together and sort of tell a story. If I think about the High Priestess in relation to the Magician, I think about the fact that the moon, who rules your seventh house, place of intimate relationships, is in Leo in the eighth, as a kind of queen figure in the eighth house that's saying, make sure that that creative process is relationally sensitive. It's not so cavalier and sort of personal and avant-garde that you're not considering the relational impact it will have in your life, maybe with a spouse or family or friends or some other relationships that you have. But not only that, but make sure it's highly intuitive and felt. Are you tapping into your emotions? Are you listening to the emotional feedback that you're receiving in the environment? Because the Magician and High Priestess together feature both the creative capacity and I think the intuitive and emotional sensitivity for something to become not just creatively productive and sort of magical, but really refined and sensitive and like careful to consider how things will go out and impact other people.
I love that. I love that. It's interesting too, because I think that, you know, for Capricorn rising, a Saturn ruled sign, having a Venus ruled fifth house, that feels really applicable with that, Adam, right? There's a relational need that's required from the mediating point of this T-square that feels very necessary. Yeah.
Right. So let's, from that standpoint, let's move along to Aquarius. So for Aquarius, we have The full moon in Leo in the 7th, of course, Sun and Pluto entering on the 20th into your first house, which is huge. And then that full moon on the 25th of January with the T square to Jupiter. And actually, I'm going to see if I can't just back this up one day. There we go. That's a little bit closer. So, I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind right away is I did a live reading earlier this week for someone who had Pluto entering the first house. And I talked about the fact that when Pluto enters your first house, the bottom line is that you are no longer allowed to be the same person. It's like your higher self is, blasting a little trumpet and saying, it is time for parts of you that have been repressed or suppressed to come back from the dead, to make an appearance and to become the leader rather than, someone locked in a closet. It can be like that. The shadow or repressed parts of yourself are ready to step forward. It can also be about changes in the ideas that connect you to other people. As Aquarians, highly social, often ironically alone in a crowd, but still often highly social, loves to be stimulated by the intellect and, the nervous mental connection of ideas and people. So like the heartbeat of Aquarius. However, when Pluto enters the first house, it could be that the type of people or the communal spaces in your life are ready to shift because you're ready to shift. And that's a pretty common parallel for Aquarians going through identity transformations. Your mind, body, intellect, appearance could all go through changes, but it's the beginning of a long process of death and rebirth on the level of identity and on the level of your body and how you relate to others in the world.
I think.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Adam. No, please.
All I was going to say is the full moon, of course, highlights the tension between that transformation and the role of important people in your life, relationships. And both are also in a conversation with Jupiter in the 4th house, which is such a fertile placement for Jupiter. It's like things are growing at the roots of your life, the foundation, what provides support, whether that's home, family, property. There's things growing at the roots of the chart, offering greater stability, ease, peace, and they coincide with the need to make tremendous changes in your identity and alongside of, tensions in your social contracts, social or interpersonal relationships.
I think I love that because, I think with Aquarius there's so many tensions in Aquarius. And I think one of them is exactly what you said. It's okay to know that you need others. It's okay to I think Saturn ruled signs can often deal with feeling like they're a little isolated and a little misunderstood in many ways. It's like this part of the sort of the karmic imprint of a strong Saturn impression in the chart. And I think with Aquarius particularly, it's like, it's okay to recognize that in order for your life to feel stable, you need that electric interaction that, like a circuit can't just function on its own. It needs interaction with other circuits. It's like, a neuron on its own isn't particularly effective, but put all together, it creates our entire nervous system, right? There's this idea of really knowing that it's okay to need some connectivity. And that will probably be a big thing that's starting around this time, but that you're just beginning a really amazing 20 years process of shifting around in that.
The card that I drew for Aquarians, another very strong card, the Devil card. You guys know this. It's an interesting card because one of the things that people regularly point out about this card is that the two figures, kind of like an Adam and Eve figure with little horns, sitting chained to the devil's throne, but the nooses around their neck are like easily large enough for them to just take off if they want to. So there's this sense of like what we chain ourselves to. And oftentimes the devil is an archetype, right? I don't think of the devil literally as much as I do archetypally. And when I think of the devil, I think of those things that we bind ourselves to, usually out of hurt and pain that's been unprocessed, unresolved. And so we develop coping mechanisms that eventually become like handcuffs around us. And that can take so many different forms, thought patterns, behavioral patterns, addictions, the types of relationships we get into. I see this as a year for Aquarians to take that pattern, just like the chain around the neck and the people in the card, and just take it off and say, I'm not going to be bound to the shadow that is in me, whether it's severe or minor. I'm letting go of something that, maybe it has served a purpose or it's played a role, and it's been, it's been useful. The devil, as they say, Um, but in order to open up new possibilities, I have to unbind myself from things that are no longer good for me.
Yeah. Beautifully said. Beautifully
Yeah.
said.
Okay, so now, and again, don't think that that has to be extreme, right? It can be small adjustments that the devil card represents. I've seen the devil card come up when people are ready to kick coffee in the morning because they're ready to go for a while without caffeine or something. Like it really can be about small adjustments that we're making to bring more light and consciousness, and we rely on fewer negative coping mechanisms. All right, let's go forward to the final sign of Pisces. And we have the metacosmia, the liminal spaces of 12, 6, and 3, the Sun and Pluto entering the 12th, full moon on the 25th in Leo, and a T-square to Jupiter and Taurus in the 3rd. Now remember, this happens between the 20th with Sun and Pluto entering Aquarius and the 25th, which is the full moon in Leo. So we're looking at a 5-day period here in January. The first thing that comes to my mind is that with Saturn in your first house and Pluto entering the 12th, it could feel like 2024 is a bit melancholic for Pisceans, because there's always a feeling of gravitas and weightiness. Even if the things you're doing are things that you are very serious about in a good way, there's still a little bit of a heaviness. Like I think about when Saturn was going through some of the placements in my chart when I was studying astrology and getting really, really intensely, studying a ton. There were some really strong Saturn placements that made that time very weighty and consequential, and my thoughts were just more deep and serious. I hold all of those things that I learned so much more lightly now than I did in the beginning. So there's a way in which I see Pisceans needing to take themselves and the things coming up very seriously right now. But you can also take things seriously in a way that, if you can recognize, I'm in an archetypal season in which I may need to take some things seriously, my emotions, my feelings, my thoughts. But this is not who I am. It's like a season that I'm in. You can get just a little bit of distance from it. I also wonder, the shadow for Pisceans in the 12th house Aquarius is that sort of detached broad-mindedness. For example, it can really help a Piscean who's super empathetic to learn a little bit about Buddhist philosophy. For example, in many different branches of Buddhism, the one common teaching is that impermanence is in suffering is a basic reality. And Alex, you know this very well. The importance of having that perspective is that you by having that philosophy, you as a Piscean, your ability to experience suffering is maybe more open, more emotionally sensitive, more empathic, so to speak. But you can also develop a philosophical perspective that gives you some room to step out of that and say, right now it's too much. I need to put that in the bin of what the Buddha said. Suffering is basic and fundamental, and in some ways there's nothing I can do about it. And even if you can just turn the volume down on how identified you can get with other people's emotions and feelings and suffering by 25% because of some broader minded philosophy, that's a win. You don't have to feel every iota of suffering that exists to be an authentic person. And sometimes Pisceans don't know that.
Or to be a good person, good person too. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. What's coming to mind with that in Buddhism too is so the first noble truth is there is suffering in the world, right? The universality of suffering. The second noble truth is suffering has causes. And I feel like there's, on a personal level with Pisces, with Pluto moving into your 12th house, where you may be taking on too much, where you may be there may be causes of excess or unnecessary suffering. Pluto will help you slowly begin to unpack where those ideas are within you, because there's a sense with sometimes, and I do this as a highly empathic person because of my sun conjunct Neptune. That's how it's represented in my chart. But I have to remind myself it's not my responsibility to process everybody's emotions and energy. I can be aware of them. I can help where I can. I can do what I can to, I can have that as a call to action. But what you might find is that you take on other people's energy and emotion, and then you start to process it for them. And that can be a cause of immense unnecessary suffering, where Pluto may show you in different ways in your 12th house where that might be happening, where you can say, it's not my responsibility to process all the emotions of the school I teach at, or all the emotions of my family, or all the emotions of this social network that I'm in. I can be within myself. I can notice it. I can do what I can for it. I can also recognize that there are times where I need to put some of that down. And so the causes, I would really look at that second noble truth. What are the causes of suffering coming up as well? Pluto will be a great ally in uncovering that.
Yeah. The card that I drew for Pisceans for January in this little passage is the Two of Swords, which is interesting because you can see the person is blindfolded with the swords crossed around them. The moon is out. They're sitting by water. It's a feminine looking character. And I think what I see here is like, again, I think of Pluto entering the 12th with Saturn in the first right away. And I just think, don't get paralyzed feeling like this can represent, for example, having hard decisions to make, and sort of like analysis by paralysis, or paralysis by analysis. It can also represent needing to feel your way as well as think your way in equal measure through situations. That might be more challenging. This is also, like, to me, this also says that, you might be worried about getting it wrong. And I think, like, one of the things that I think about with like the access of the 12th and the 6th is that these are liminal spaces that ask us to adjust or adapt when things are outside of our control. When we lose the plot somehow, or it takes a twist that we weren't expecting, and we're asked to adapt. And I could see Pisceans feeling a little frozen by that this year at worst. But actually, what's really interesting is that Jupiter in the third house is going to be pouring resources into your environment that can help you stabilize and harmonize. And so you can't be so blind by the difficulty of decisions and impasses and, trying to get things right and not disappoint anyone or whatever, that you don't lose sight of blessings, opportunities, resources, help, support that's coming in to help you manage and feel and think your way through situations.
That's a great, way of, incorporating that 12th house, first house stuff, right? Is, naturally water signs are feelers, and Pisces also, intuitive, and beyond feeling, the sense of you sort of go with the gut or the impression you're getting. Pluto might also ask you to be like, where are the places you can look at that intuition? I mean, I know in my work, the thing I need to do a lot of times when I'm doing intuitive reads for people is I get the impression, but I need to step back from it and analyze it a second before I say it. I think that there's something really necessary with Pluto there that just offers like hey, just take a look at this from a slightly bigger, more cerebral perspective before you start bringing it out there into the world, before you start like going on it, just because it could be something that offers you a great deal of benefit.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for example, of something that you take a lot of pride in, that you've been identified with, that you've been working on behalf of, and something coming in and saying, it may not work, or it may have to adjust or adapt. The full moon in Leo in the 6th house, to me, along with Saturn in the first, says there's something that I am disappointed that I can't achieve, or that I've been really investing in. My heart and my ego has been invested in developing or cultivating something, and some other presence is coming in that's bigger than me and asking me to adapt or shift or change, and I feel sort of stuck, or like, what do I do? And I think if we can start with this kind of very cheesy and sort of radical assumption that the things that are happening are not happening to us but for us, that doesn't mean that you can't feel like antagonized by the cosmos. Like, of course we can, and we do. And like, why is this? You're going to suffer. It's part of the plan, right? But if we can slowly shift our posture to being like, okay, I'm going to put my hands out and receive this, fuck you, but I'll just do it.
Yeah.
You know, like then I think it ends up that we start seeing the creative potential of the crossroads that we're at, rather than it being a crisis. We see it as a creative gateway that's opening up.
One of the exercises Pema Chodron, the Buddhist teacher, has, it's very simple, is when shit's going down, is to remind yourself other people are experiencing this, or other people felt this way. And it breeds compassion, compassion in the sense of like, I'm not alone in this. And, you might even just go into history and you'll see the way human beings have gone through tough stuff. But there's a sense where compassion is bred not from feeling like my heart has to be in the emotional field of everything, which can be exhausting, but rather saying like, when I'm experiencing this, other people have experienced this. That's where the first noble truth is not just saying, well, hey, bummer, it's just suffering in the world. It's also saying, sorry, it's like saying, here's a great connection point. This person have been in pain. I've been in pain. I know what that experience is like. I may not know their story or their experience, but I can connect with them on this very resonant heart-to-heart level. That breeds really healthy and compassion that has a sense of a little bit of a boundary to it, where you're not so pulled towards the other person's field. Yeah.
That's a great like bow to put around the Pisces reading. That's perfect. You guys, if you want to learn more about the fantastic Alex Amorosi, find him at alexamorosi.com, where if you would like, you can book a reading with him and talk more about your birth chart. I think that you'll really enjoy working with him. You can also find his work on Instagram at Alex Amorosi Healing, where he makes regular astrological content, and on this show every month, as he ensures that I don't lose my sanity. So, so I really appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you too, my friend. It's always fun.
On that note, I want to remind everybody that we are trying to get to 1,777 backers by New Year's Eve. As of right now, we've gained a lot of support during this live stream today, so I'm really feeling pretty optimistic at the moment. 1,777 minus 1,116 means that we have just 661 backers left to go by New Year's Eve. I think we can do it. If you want to donate and haven't yet, find the link to the Kickstarter after this post is done. It'll be pinned to the top of the comment section or in the description of the video. Otherwise, you can also find it by going over to nightlightastrology.com. Look at all of the courses we offer you guys. The 4 class pass, the 3, 2, and 1 class passes give you 50% off the normal price. That sale's not going to be back until next year during our Kickstarter. So it's a great time if you want to come study with us in the year ahead. It's a great time to pick up a super good discount on our programs. Come study with us. It's not too late to hop in the program that recently started, or you can hop in the June program if you want to start with year 1. Year 2 starts in June. Year 3 starts in January. Masterclass starts in January. The Moon Circle that we meet up with monthly, a team of awesome people that are there to help you go through every moon cycle of the year with plants and spiritual practices and rituals that we design for every moon cycle. Come and hang out with us in community around the moon cycle. Roots and Spheres programs on sale through the Kickstarter. So lots of good things you can pick up when you pledge and support the channel. And I hope to see some of you in any of those programs soon. Otherwise, you can also pick up your rising sign reading Alex and I do for you in the Kickstarter as well. So that is it for today. Thank you guys so much for being here. We so appreciate you and all of your comments and reflections and just making this a really warm, fun experience today. Hope you guys will have a nice rest of your day, and we will see you again soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.